Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind, and today we are going to introduce you to Kiranbir Sodhia, who's the Senior Engineering Manager at Google, leading teams developing machine learning authoring frameworks for Google and the open source community. He's spent over 15 years working in the AI, AR, gaming, mobile app, and semiconductor industries at companies you've heard of like Microsoft, Apple, and Garmin International. Notably, at Microsoft, he led software development teams in Azure, Xbox, and HoloLens. Thanks for coming on the show, Kiranbir.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I don't think I did your bio justice. So, just for the benefit of everybody, can you walk us through your illustrious career?
Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, so I got into the industry 15 years ago. I guess a little over 15 years now. Not too different than everybody else. I studied computer engineering in university. But I guess through my career, every step of the way, I knew what I wanted to do next. So like from the age of 17, it's like I want to go work at Apple. By the age of 40, making iPods. Of course, I'm not quite 40 yet, and the iPod's not around anymore. But like, I knew exactly what I wanted to do next, and so I was able to take the steps to get there. So my first goal was getting to Apple, and I go for the interview. I don't get the job, um, but I'm looking at internships, and I get all these internship offers, and some of them are higher than others. But I figured, let me pick the internship that's going to give me the skills to get to Apple. So I went with Garmin. They were working on operating systems, consumer devices. It was a small company that was nearby where I grew up. So yeah, that's where I started my journey as an intern there. Got a full time job, had some of the best mentors. Uh, Used my free time to make a website if I had to create an iPod shuffle from scratch. That's what got me noticed by Apple. About 2.5 years later, I got the interview for a full time job, made my way to Apple. Way earlier than I expected. I was maybe 21 or 22. And my goal then was, okay, be a good engineer here and maybe work my way up into leadership eventually. So I tried to do a good job, worked on some amazing products with amazing people. And eventually, some of those people I worked with went to Microsoft, a weird place to go back in 2013, especially to leave Apple to go there. Um, but I got a call from one of my friends, and he's like, "Hey, I know you wanted to look into leadership. You have a chance to build a team here, and I'm not going to tell you what you're going to work on, but it's not going to be a phone. It's not going to be a tablet. It's not going to be a computer because we're going to fail against Apple if we do that." So it got me excited, and it ended up being the first generation of the HoloLens. So it's one of the first, I think, 100 engineers on it. Um, yeah, so I got the start of my management career there. First being a tech lead, then hiring my own team, building a team, and at Microsoft they really invested in their managers. So you know, I went from managing a team of 3 to 8. Eventually, we merged with Xbox, and I managed a team of about 15 people. Over time, got to Azure, and I left Microsoft after 9 years, managing about 50 people. So really grew my management career there. Got a lot of training, learned a lot of lessons, and then at the end of my term at Microsoft, I really wanted to show that I can be a good leader at other companies, not just a leader in consumer electronics, but a leader in software in general. And I wanted to prove I can do that at other places. So I'm at Google now. I get to work in the hottest space right now, machine learning and AI, and that's keeping me busy and excited.
Here, but could I just go back in time for a little bit?
Yeah,
17 years old, like most people at 17, including myself, like are morons. Like we don't know what we want to do. Like we're really dumb. Like we have no idea. It's like that's a big issue now where kids have to like get hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt in college and they have no idea what they're going to do. How did you know so early that this is my thing? Because that's amazing at 17 to know, hey, this is what I want to do with my life. Where some people are 30 and 40 and don't even know what to do with their life.
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and I will say I'm partially lucky. I figured out my hobbies very early on. I knew I loved building things, but I also pivoted along the road. Truthfully, I wanted to be an engineer since I was 12. I thought I wanted to make video games first because I love playing video games. Um, and I was just a big fan of tech, and there was this sense I want to go work on those products. But on that note, I wouldn't say there's anything that made me find my path earlier than other people. I think I just consider myself lucky there. I kind of knew what I liked that early on. So yeah,
And it seems like you've kept this enthusiasm up even till now, right? Like I just get the vibe from you that sometimes you can, okay, when you're young, you're like, oh my God, I want to do this. And then you do it. And then after a while it fades. But for you, I'm just drawing from this little time we're talking. You
yeah,
probably have the same enthusiasm now in your 30s than you were at 17. That's amazing.
yeah. I think there is one other aspect to it, and this is something for all the blind users out there. There's going to be tough times. You're going to feel negative where you're at. But I think one thing that always grounds me is tomorrow's a new day. Be optimistic, be excited for the opportunities ahead. And I think that's the reason I'm always excited and I know what I want to do next is because I make sure that I'm optimistic. I look at the positives, not what's going on today.
I
It's funny,
really
I I,
appreciate.
I thought the first question you guys are going to ask me is what's my total comp?
TC or
TC or
GTFO,
GTFO. Yeah, exactly.
right? That'd be too rude. We wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
No,
Rick, I'm
I
sorry, you're going to say
really
something, Rick. Right.
no, I really appreciate that reminder in terms of kind of figuring out kind of what you want to do and staying kind of true to yourself and saying, actually, you know what, tomorrow I could try again. You know, walk me through that kind of pivotal moment where you interviewed at Apple. That was where you wanted to go for so long. You've known early on you didn't get the job offer. Obviously, it ended up working for you later on, but kind of connect me through that step A, not getting that offer, to what did you do next?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. This is also something that I have to remind myself. So here's an interesting thing. First internship was Garmin. The first time I interviewed, they put my resume in the discard pile at the career fair. Second time, I got the internship offer. First time at Apple, I interviewed, I didn't get the offer. Second time I interviewed, I got the job. Microsoft, it was my fourth time interviewing that I got the job. And I think even for Google, it was my second time. So I have never joined a company uh, after my first interview there. I always had to repeat an interview. So that's one thing I always use to ground myself. And that is advice I give everybody. I've worked at these amazing companies, but I didn't get there on my first try. Um, and, there's that Michael Jordan quote about how many free throws he missed, how many
Mhm.
championship games he lost. And he's like, I try, I fail, I fail, I fail. And that is why I'm great. And so that's a quote I also like. Um, I am not afraid of failure. I think that is part of the journey. Um, and yeah, so getting back to your question here, um, I never even thought I would get that interview at Apple the first time around. I was still in college, I was young, I got the interview request, I studied my ass off, went for the interview, and I was actually pretty happy with my interview results. Of course, just like every other person interviewing, you go home and you're like, how could I have answered that question better? And I didn't get the offer, and it really bummed me out. But I didn't walk away saying I hate that company or I hate those people. It's that, you know what, in 2 years, I'm going to go work with those people. Like, I want to get better. I want to show them that I can deliver. And in 2 years, I'll probably chat with the same interviewers. I want to get that job next time. So I walked away with motivation. And that's something every company should do. There was a thing at Microsoft, hire or no hire, make people want to use your products and make them want to come back and interview again. So that's my advice to all the interviewers and companies out there. But yeah, I went home. I was deflated for maybe a couple weeks, and then I was like, I'm gonna get better at this job. So I'm gonna learn as much as I can at Garmin. Um, and what I didn't learn there, I was like, I'm gonna make an iPod shuffle at home. That's how I'm gonna show them I can do this job. Um, so the 2 year mark comes in. I get the call from Apple. I study again. I go to the interview, and question after question. This is a funny story. I was like, "Oh, I'm knocking it out of the ballpark. This is great." I was so confident, and at the end of the interview, I was smiling. I loved chatting with everybody that day. The recruiter walks in, and he's like, I hear good signs from the current interviewers, but usually if you're smiling at the end of the interview, it's a good sign. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I get a call that I'm getting the offer, and I'm like, it's this kind of energy that builds, and you're so happy. Like, oh, I got to move out of Kansas now to the Bay Area. This is going to be awesome. But it was the most amazing feeling. And this is the funny story. I eventually joined the team, and I look at the list of interview questions, and there's like 100 interview questions. And the 8 they asked me that day, I was like, oh, I know that one. I know that one. I don't know that one. I was like, wow, am I the luckiest person in the world that all the questions in here that I knew how to answer, they asked me. Yeah, it was the most exciting thing. Join Apple, and of course, the imposter syndrome comes up. It's like, I got to prove myself to everyone here. But the thing I got fortunate with at Apple was I got lucky with some of the best mentors.
Guys, to my knowledge, a tech interview is so much different than maybe an interview on Wall Street or some other sectors. Can you give some light? People on the Blind platform talk about it a lot, but this for general audience, because we share the podcast with general audience as well. What is it like to go in and interview for Apple and Microsoft and some of these top companies?
Yeah, it's like a college entrance exam, or even like a final on a university. Today, most of the interview is this lead code style interview. So it's like asking people to solve known problems, writing code on a board. It's somewhat about speed. How many questions can you answer? Today, it's unfortunately devolved to, do you already know the answer to this question, as opposed to, how do you think? But these questions, they really test your skills of experience in coding, logic, I would say. Ideally, the ability to clarify the problem. So those ones are rough. It's like being asked to answer a math question on a whiteboard, but the system design ones are fun. The reason is there's common ways to answer these questions, and system design is, how do you build Google Maps, or how do you build Gmail, or how do you build this thing? It's very ambiguous, very large questions, and how do you answer that question in 45 minutes? And the advice I have for people is, imagine you're working with your closest technical peer that you get along with, and you were to go to a whiteboard and discuss this for 45 minutes. If those are the types of experiences you want to show in the interview, but it is a rough journey, I will say. You have to prepare for these interviews. It's not just figuring out what is my greatest strength, what is my weaknesses, and what are my weaknesses. It's not just these behavioral conversational questions. Your brain is the test, not just your communication skills. Yeah.
How long does it take for these interviews on average? Is
Yeah.
it hours, days? Do you take it home to work on, or how does that?
Good question. So most of the big tech companies in Silicon Valley are very similar. It's one or two coding interviews, one or two system design interviews, and a behavioral interview. So it's typically 5 total interviews. And each of them are about 45 minutes to an hour. And to get to that interview, you usually have to do 1 or 2 phone screens. So that's the typical process. There are some variations. For example, when I interviewed at Garmin, it was a code review round. They gave you some code, and you're like, okay, there's a lot of things wrong with this. Go figure out what it is. That was my internship interview. Apple's interviews are very much focused on the problems they actually solve. They don't ask the generic questions. A lot of their questions line up to code that you would actually write at the company. Like I remember one of the questions was, how do you remove escape characters from SMSs? And that was for the telephony team. So it's like very relevant. Microsoft and Google are some of the more standard ones where you get generic coding questions and then these system design questions of building a large scale type of infrastructure. But yeah, that's the typical pattern. There are some companies that take home questions. There are some companies that do this presentation style thing, like you come in and you have to present to the entire interview panel you worked on for a year that you're proud about. So those are some of the variations that you might see. And it takes, on average, I would say, if you're L3 to L5, so kind of junior to mid-level engineer, it'll probably take 1 to 2 months to prepare, a couple hours a day in the evenings. And then when people interview, they typically interview with multiple companies because you did all that prep work. Yeah, so I'd say it takes a couple months of preparation, and the interview process typically lasts a month with 8 hours of actual interviews.
Man, so that is a stressful time period to go through an interview. And is there any kind of, because with other interviews in different sectors, it's more about tell me about yourself.
Mhm.
When was the time you succeeded? When was the time you did? So it sounds like they don't ask those kind of questions to see who you are as a human being. They just want to know, can you code? And that's it. You could be like
Yeah,
the worst human being in the world, but you're an awesome coder. So, okay, you're hired.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they do have those questions, but it's like 20% of
Yeah.
the entire interview process. Um, and there's very little leeway in a lot of these companies. For the 5 interviews you have in person, you have to pretty much land all 5. Maybe you can get away with doing well on 4 of the interviews. Yeah.
Damn. I'm
And
like,
it's become a skill, actually. That's the thing.
yeah.
Like it went from you using your experience to and now being a skill to be a good interviewer too. So it's tough, and I hope that there is reform there eventually. Because today I think our interviews just serve to filter out bad candidates. It doesn't help quantify good candidates. Yeah.
Well, in your experience as a manager that has built teams, that has interviewed dozens, hundreds of people for roles, how do you deal with that interview process? On the other side, how do you then find the good, the great, the exceptional candidates that you want to add onto your team?
Yep, that's a great question. So, some places you don't have that flexibility. Like there's some companies that the interviews are done by panels that are actually outside of your team. So I can't touch much there, but at Microsoft, interviews were done by the team itself. They decided the structure. It still had to be the same number of interviews, but you could decide what kind of questions were relevant. And I really like that. So when I was at Microsoft, I kept it minimal for coding. Like you can tell everything you need to know with one coding round, in all honesty. 1 or 2 questions. You have the phone screen already. That's also a little bit of coding. So with those 2 interviews, you learn. You're not going to find out something about the candidate with 5 coding rounds versus 2 coding rounds. So I focused a lot on keeping the coding rounds minimal. They're still needed. You still have to see that from the candidates, but I like to screen in, meaning, okay, let me not find reasons to push people out of this interview process. Let me find reasons that they're good for the team. So past the coding round, we had a lot of system design questions that were relevant to what we're actually doing on the team. So like, this is a problem we just solved 6 months ago. I would love to hear your solution on it. And that's where we could see how candidates thought. It was, a good example is we had junior engineers who often answer the questions really well because they didn't think about the same constraints we used to think about. And so we were like, oh yeah, we should have thought about that too. And that's what really excelled. And I always gave this advice to the interviewers um, on my team. You're going to have to work with this person. So two things are going to happen. Either you're going to dread it and you're going to pick up the work because they're dropping it, or you're going to love solving problems on the whiteboard together. You're going to love working together. So if you walk away with the feeling that you're going to like working with this person every single day, the answer is yes. If you're a little bit nervous or you're not sure, then the answer is no. One other technique I did is uh, if we couldn't get that signal from someone, we would invite them back for a team lunch and see how they interacted when there was no interview questions, no pressure, just casual conversation. But that was the thing for me. You have to count on these people. You have to enjoy working with them. And that's the only additional measure we could look for past coding is would we enjoy working with them? Because that is a big part of the job.
I mean, given that is the criteria on the candidate side, getting a bit tactical, how do you recommend that folks stand out in their interview process, right? Is it how they're answering the whiteboard? Is it, how they're presenting themselves during the situational? Is it what they say or what they do during that team lunch? What can we do to kind of say, hey, you know what? I obviously can show that I'm a good coder. What's that
Yeah.
extra plus that gets you noticed?
Yeah, so one thing that has really stuck out for me with interviews I remember were a lot of candidates are like, I want to work at this company because of X, or I want to work at this company because of Y. It's the candidates that were excited about the problems we asked them. Like they really loved the challenge of that problem. Like one of the questions I used to ask is like, how do you update a remote control that ran out of flash memory? And some people were just kind of sit there and try to think of a solution. Some people got excited about the problem, throwing random things out there, focusing on them. And I think, again, that excitement, it lets you build off of each other. You riff on the problem together. So, if you're interviewing at these companies, it's good to say that you want to work at them. There's nothing wrong with that. That's why we all interview. But you should be excited about the problems, and I would recommend that you show that excitement because that goes a long ways. Um, so be excited about the problem. Throw solutions out there. Learn about the problems the team is dealing with. Not just what are the generic things? How is work-life balance? How is XYZ? You'll get those answers, but like, what are the technical problems? And have that conversation with interviewers. Like, what's the toughest technical problem you're solving today? And see if you can rip off that. So show excitement for what the job actually is, not just the company and the team and so forth.
It's so interesting. It's a different way than other people how they interview where, hey, I want to work for this company because it's, very prestigious and my family and friends are going to think, oh my God, Rick and Jack are working at this company. They're so cool. But instead, it's really within your ecosystem, the tech sector, it's more of, hey, I just want to dive into this problem. I'm just
Yeah,
like, I'm not going to be able to sleep at night because I'm just thinking about how I'm going to work on this. And as a manager, it sounds like those are who you want, not just the label Apple or Microsoft or Google or whatever it might
exactly.
be. It's like they want to solve these big, hairy problems.
Yeah,
And that's the people you want to hire because they're just passionate about it.
absolutely. That's the thing for me is it's really hard to do a good job unless you're excited about that problem that you're trying to solve. And so that's what I look for a lot. Yeah.
On another note, I'm blind. I see this all the time where people are constantly saying, do I take the offer from Uber? Do I take the offer from Meta? Do I take an offer? What do you think of those conversations? Is it going back to just like we were talking about, finding the problems, or is there substance to the fact of like, hey, one company may help your career better? Is there a way to answer some of these
Yeah, that's a
ongoing
good.
questions, and any suggestions you have for people, like where you would recommend people maybe to go and think, hey, here's a great company if you have these skills or want to do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you know, there's nothing wrong with saying you want to go work for a company. At the
Mhm.
beginning of this, I said I had my eyes set at Apple when I was like 19 because I wanted to work on those products. But uh, I think this is the one advice I give a lot of my peers and my friends and folks who are debating different offers. I think about what job you might want in 5 years, maybe even 10 years. Usually 5 years is the right mark. And is this job going to help you get to that one? Because there's always this short-term view of what pays the highest TC today. And the reason I say that, the reason I try to recommend people avoid that is uh, the one that has a lesser TC might give you bigger growth. And so in 5 years, that question is moved, like you'll be making more at that company. So like, don't think about the short-term compensation necessarily as the only standpoint. Think about where your career is going to grow, what job's going to help you get to the next job you want. So when I was looking at internships, Garmin was not the highest offer on the table, but it was the only one that was going to give me the skills and the problems that would let me get into Apple. So I made that choice. Um, when I was at Microsoft, I got interview calls every week, just like everybody did during the boom. Um, and one thing was I knew I wanted to be a senior leader next, so I never settled for down levels, even if the compensation was more. I never settled for less responsibilities, even if the compensation was more. Um, so pick the job, pick the offer that gets you to your long-term goal, not just short-term PC, unless that is what is important to you, the short-term PC. So that's my general advice there. And then there's also the question of startups versus big companies. Uh, I think startups are a great place to learn fast if you're new to the industry. If you're more senior, if you get a lot of equity, it could be worth your time. But one of the things I also have for senior people out there, this is advice I got from one of my former mentors and managers at Apple, is at a certain point in your career, also pick the job that you are passionate about, like product wise. Like he's big into cars, so he's at Rivian right now, and it's like, okay, yeah, he's changed his career now to actually work on products he cares about. So those are the various pieces of advice I would give someone depending on their stage in their career.
I think that makes sense, right? Because this over optimization on total compensation or dollars at the expense of things like how fast you can accelerate your
Mhm.
career, or what skills you're working on, or what problems you're going to solve. I mean, those are the things that are going to come up in those future interviews, right? You almost don't want to
Absolutely.
seem like a generic candidate in each of your interviews where maybe you don't necessarily care about the problem that you're going to solve there, or you don't know what the product is. You're just chasing the latest trend, or you're chasing that paycheck, where it almost becomes very difficult for the interviewer, for the hiring manager, for the HR team to kind of tell you apart. Because
Yep.
unfortunately, right, some of these companies, they know they pay well, and they
Yeah.
know folks are into it, the paycheck. But where do you go to differentiate yourself? How do you stand out? How do you then get that team to actually want to pick you to join?
Absolutely. Like same thing. Don't ask who's going to pay the highest comp for L5 today. Ask which one's going to grow you to L7 because that's going to be great in the long term. Um, but one thing that I will also say for folks who are interviewing and they're not sure how the process is done, by the end of an interview cycle, we might actually have anywhere from 3 to 5 candidates for a job where they answered all the questions right. So there is something that you have to do besides answering all these technical questions. There is something that you have to leave an impression on. So by all means, you have to stand out from everybody else. You can't just be, I'm really good at solving leak code questions. Um, you have to either solve big problems in the industry, show that you've done something meaningful, or be excited about the problems that we're working on.
I think that's also that makes sense to me, right? Because I've also heard that some of these cooler industries that folks want to get into, I know for the longest time, video games was one such industry where the compensation is lower than everyone
Mm.
else because they know there's such a demand for folks that want to get into the industry, right? And so they know, oh, perhaps I can pay a little bit less. On the Wall Street finance side, we've heard of the so-called Goldman discount, where Goldman Sachs, one of the top tier investment banks, they'll pay just a little bit less than all the other folks because they know folks want that Goldman Sachs lettering
Yep.
on that LinkedIn page, on that resume, so they can get away
Yep.
with it, right? That pricing power that the employers have.
Yep. Absolutely. I do think there's that part of it. Um, I think that's always going to exist too.
Mhm.
There's some companies that are known to overwork and underpay, but you know that they produce good engineers. So there's nothing wrong with that too. If it helps you build some experience that will carry weight. Like, this is another thing. Uh, how long you've been at a company too. That's something that comes up. Oh, should we hire this person? They jumped around every 12 months. They jumped around every 2 years. It's very different, from a startup and a large company. At a startup, you do a lot in 1 year. You do a lot in 2 years. At the larger companies, just to kind of be useful, these 150,000 plus people companies, it takes 6 months to understand how to even influence anybody in the
Mhm.
organization. So when I look at people at larger companies, they don't really do anything significant for 1 year, even 2 years. It sometimes takes them 3 years before they were able to do something from end to end, not just be a contributor or part of the project. So that is one thing I'll also say was when you go to a company, if it's a small company, a startup, yeah, you're probably going to do a lot. But if you're going to one of these bigger companies, I will look to see, did you ship something from end to end from the day the thought and the concept came about to the day it was shipped out, or did you join mid-cycle, execute on a few things, and then bail to the next thing? So that is something, if you're at a company and you're thinking about which company to join, make sure you do something meaningful there because that is something that will help you stand out at the next interview.
I mean, going a little bit deeper in that vein, are there any other red flags, right? Maybe it's a certain company and you've only stayed there for 1 year, and maybe folks will think, oh, did this person get asked to leave on a performance improvement plan or something similar? Are there kind of these things that you in the industry, as a senior manager that's been doing this for so long, just readily see and kind of understand, uh-oh, I maybe want to dig in deeper there?
Yeah, I think one thing I also try to do is try to unbias myself from some of these red flags because there could be various reasons. So I would encourage, if there's something that stands out about the resume, don't just ignore it. But um, what what I would say is there's always going to be some of these in a lot of people's resumes, especially if somebody who's worked 20 years, they'll know a bad company when they're at a bad company. So it's completely understandable that they're leaving. You don't want to see a pattern of that. And it's different, for somebody who's junior, somebody who's a senior engineer, and they're just wanting to be strong at execution. I can understand them bailing on a sinking ship. I don't like that for senior leaders. You are supposed to fix that sinking ship.
Mm.
So if you're like, I'm bailing because this company is toxic, were you supposed to fix that problem? So those are the things
Yeah.
to kind of put on your resume or kind of give a reasoning behind it. But people get laid off, people get terminated. Sometimes it's the wrong job, wrong company. Um, you don't want to see a pattern of that. That's the only thing. Yeah.
Can I go back to you guys about total compensation? Because partly, you'll see the conversations going on where how much money you can make and go that direction. But then also there's the reality. So let's say you live in San Francisco and you have a couple of kids and you still have loans outstanding. Is there sometimes pressure too to really go after that total compensation, even if the company isn't what you'd want, or even if it's like the project that you'd love to do, you're not working on it, but you look at the reality of how much do I have to pay on my mortgage? How do I pay off my college debt? I have kids, and then you really can't make a decision because it's like, oh, I really want to take this job. Well, Rick and I did this in a podcast, recently going through, hey, your total compensation, maybe I'll make it up, 500,000. But then when you start looking at taxes and everything else, it's like, yikes, you don't really have that much money left over. Is that a thing too? Like, I mean, what do you do in these circumstances?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Um, what do they say? Comparison is the thief
Thief
of
of
joy, or
joy,
whatever it
right?
is.
Something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So you know, being embedded in this space, we always make those comparisons. A lot of people use TC as their
Yeah.
metric. How am I improving in my life? Am I just getting like my TC is my score, and my score is going up, right? Um, and you can get very miserable, and it can be very toxic. But there's a few things. Worrying about TC is very different. Yeah, there. Keep in mind there are people who are doing very, very well at the age of 22, making more money than 95% of Americans. And yeah, the taxes are higher and rents are higher, but they're still walking away with much more money than a lot of other Americans. So I think that's one thing to always ground yourself in is it may seem like, oh yeah, Bay Area sucks, Seattle sucks, our TCs don't match the cost of living. You're still making a lot more money than most Americans and
Dude,
saving or investing a lot more money.
dude, it's so crazy. I'm so glad you said that, because how many times do you see a post? I'm 27 years old and my net worth is like $5 million and I'm just such a loser. Like,
Yeah,
what? What? The average
exactly.
American makes what, like 40,000 or 50,000? And
Exactly.
you're like making,
Exactly.
but your net worth is like $10 million and you're not even 30. What? So
Yeah.
is there like within this whole ecosystem, is there like a mental health thing too? Because like everybody's constantly comparing how much money they're making, what they're working on, looking at like, oh my gosh, I could have, should have went to Meta because of this, or I should have went here. And you're always like second guessing everything. Is there like a little bit of toxicity on that part too? Because everyone is kind of jockeying to see how much money am
Yeah.
I getting? What am I working on? Where am I, what's the prestige level of my company? Does that drive people crazy? Like, is that a
It,
big
it
thing?
it does, and I think there's two things. The people who dwell on it too much, they start making the wrong career decisions.
Mm.
Those are the ones who start optimizing for TC today over TC in the long run. But I have some friends who they never want to talk about work TC. They want to talk about the activities they're doing. They are so happy. And so that's one thing to remember is um, there are people who TC was never a problem until they heard somebody else's TC.
Then it's a
Um,
problem. Then it's like, what?
that's a problem. Yeah, exactly.
That guy's a
Um,
moron. How is he making more than me? What the heck?
exactly. Exactly. Always, I would tell everybody always think about what's important to you and remind yourself of things that are actually comical. Like the one I have is I talk so much about how I wanted to get to Apple, and I finally got there in 2010. Guess what I turned down to get there? Pre-IPO Facebook. So,
Oh,
it's like exactly, exactly. And who knows? Maybe I would have done well at Facebook. Maybe I wouldn't
Oh
have.
my God. Should
But
we
like,
even ask what that would be worth? No, I don't want to do that to you. I don't. Dude, but like, it's so funny you brought this up because we've spoken to other guests, the same thing. Just the other day, Rick and I had this VC and he was talking about, what was it? HubSpot, Hub,
yeah,
and he's like, he missed it. And you could just tell, oh my God, you could just feel like this guy was like, damn it, I have it in my hands.
yeah, exactly. But there's opposite stories too. So like, I remember what was Walmart's video streaming service? Voodoo, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but they had a video streaming service that came out like 15 years ago. And in my head, I was like, oh, I see an interview request from Netflix and an interview request from Walmart streaming service. Walmart is huge. They're going to destroy
Yeah.
Netflix and streaming.
Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't end up interviewing with either of them, but it was like, I could have also made big mistakes. I always tell myself, what are the startups I talked to that I would have, yeah, that would have sunk really fast. So I think when I look at it that way, it's
Yeah.
actually comical. I don't hate myself for it. It's like, oh, I could have made a lot of money there, but that other company that I thought was great just crashed and burned. So I always remind myself of that, and it keeps me uh, grounded. And I do want to get back to one point, which is the joy, because you can definitely, being everybody starts out, or a lot of people start out being an engineer because they want to build things they love working on. And you do lose some of that at big companies, right? You work on a small piece of the big pie. So you're talking about passion and these big companies. So what advice I would give to people at big companies is try to get excited about the problems that only they can solve. The ones that cost billions of dollars, as an example. Um, so that's the one thing. Like, you're definitely gonna miss out on the stuff you enjoy working on. I love working on. I love playing video games. I want to work on video games. It's not a love TC. TC is important. I'm at a big company. What is the problems I can solve here that I won't be able to solve elsewhere? That's the one thing that can help you build that joy, I would say.
Yeah, because that got to be a challenge, right? Where you're in this huge organization, right? You're Meta or Go or Microsoft, and you're just doing one little part, right? I guess that could be
Yeah.
frustrating. You could get lost, even though you're making a lot of money and you're doing a good thing. Is that something that people have to deal with too? That it's a little frustrating that you're just like a little
Yeah.
sliver.
Yeah, that is always frustrating
Yeah.
because there's bureaucracy that might slow you down. The scope is smaller. Um, so part of it is finding the joy of it. Part of it, one advice I always tell people is there's two ways. If you're given a small scope, finish it sooner so you can get a bigger scope for yourself. The other one is
Hmm.
don't be afraid to create scope too, as in um, create new pies. Don't fight for a piece of the pie. Um, so you can do that at big companies too. They have money to let you invest in your own ideas. You have to be thoughtful about it. But yeah, it is frustrating. It's frustrating, and this is even at big companies. Like when I was at Apple, our division was maybe 200-ish people. By the time I left, it was 1,300. So it's not like the work grew 6 times. We still needed more people, but that that piece gets smaller and smaller, and that can be frustrating. So you either have to find joy in what you're doing or try to create new opportunities for yourself at those companies.
Is that why, like Google, if they still have this, I think I read about where they would give you the time and resources to do different things on your own that's not really within your bailiwick, but try something different so you can be a little fresher and you can have a
Yeah,
different perspective. Does that still go on? Or
yeah,
does that happen?
different organ. I think the general 20% thing, they've kind of found what works good and what doesn't work well. For example, a lot of people working at 20% of their time on a problem, like 5 people working at 20% of their time on a problem, doesn't equal 100% because nobody can really say I'm carving out 20%. But um, It's important. Innovation is important. This is one thing I tell my teams. We're an OKR company, or at least our division is, and OKRs are good if you know how to use them. But the case I've told my team is if nobody is working on the OKRs we've defined, we are going to fail as a company. And if we're only working on the OKRs that we've defined, we're also going to fail as a company. So you need to have innovation in every organization. So it's not just you as an engineer pitching an idea uh, because it's about self growth and bringing energy. The company actually needs that to succeed. Um, you're not going to get every good idea from leadership top down. So that is something Google still supports. That's something I am a big advocate of. Is I want people to work on our OKRs, but I want ideas that weren't in our OKRs.
I really appreciate this insight, Kiranbir, into what it's like to get that big tech job offer, how to ace those job interviews, what it's even like from the manager, the interviewer's perspective. So thanks for coming on the show, Kiranbir.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me, guys. I enjoyed it.